Welcome to the Containment Zone. Some anomalies threaten with fire, others with infection, decay, or madness. But few command reverence. Few radiate the kind of presence that makes even the most hardened researchers lower their voices and avoid eye contact with an object that doesn't even move. SCP-077 has no limbs, no heart, no breath, and yet it has a will. Discovered in a shrine carved deep into the Black Mountains of Montenegro, SCP-077 was buried not to be forgotten, but to be warned against. A thing not locked away in panic, but sealed in ritual. Because this isn't just an artifact, it is a captive idea. A thing caught halfway between memory and myth, and it doesn't want to be alone anymore. The mountains were quiet, too quiet. In 1968, during routine excavation of a ruined monastery complex in Montenegro, a team of archaeologists uncovered a sealed chamber beneath the collapsed altar. The architecture was unfamiliar. Stone blocks fused with clay mortar laced with ash. Not Christian, not even Roman. Older, unmarked by language, but layered in meaning. Bones buried in circles, effigies smeared in ochre, symbols painted, then scratched over violently, again and again, like something inside had to be unremembered. They broke through the final seal at dusk. Inside, they found a single object resting atop a stone dais, surrounded by soot-blackened bones and melted iron spikes. A skull, roughly humanoid, charred, crowned by a fused ring of copper, etched with shapes that bent the eye. And carved into the wall behind it, one phrase, repeatedly etched in concentric circles around the skull's resting place. Let it forget. Let it die. Do not teach it the sky again. The lead archaeologist, Dr. Alan Stravich, ordered the chamber cleared for analysis. That night, he woke screaming, speaking a language no one on his team could identify, scratching at his face with shaking fingers, trying to rip something out of his mouth. He died within 48 hours. 3 others followed within the week, and still, the skull did not move. But everyone who came near it felt the same thing, a pressure, a presence, a scream, folded inward so tightly, it had begun to fossilize. The Foundation arrived 2 weeks later. They didn't take photos. They didn't scan it. They placed the skull in a triple-layered titanium crate lined with lead, and they flew it to Site 12, under silence and armed escort. The villagers were relieved. One of them left a message scrawled in chalk on the monastery floor. It forgets now. Do not teach it otherwise. SCP-077 is a charred humanoid skull, approximately 22 centimeters in length, weighing just under 3 kilograms. It is partially fused with an ancient copper circlet, which appears both ornamental and functional. The circlet's interior surface bears carvings resembling early Indo-European glyphs, but none that match any known linguistic system. The bone itself is scorched, as if subjected to intense localized heat, but with no signs of cracking or collapse. No mandible, no lower teeth, just the top half. Perpetually open, as if in mid-scream. But the scream never comes, because SCP-077 does not produce sound. Instead, it projects something worse. Thought. Subjects within a 10-meter radius experience waves of intrusive cognition, flashes of ritual fire, the sound of drums beating beneath the skin, the taste of iron and ash. Some feel as if they've forgotten something important. Others feel like something ancient is trying to remember through them. Proximity exposure induces disorientation, nausea, vivid hallucinations involving blackened landscapes. obsessive sketching of spiral glyphs, a compulsion to write in languages the subject does not speak. Extended exposure leads to psychological collapse. One Class D subject, kept within 077's chamber for 43 minutes, began humming in harmonic intervals not normally producible by the human vocal tract. When retrieved, he stared at the containment team and whispered, "The sky was fire. The sky was a wound. You made it remember." He died of cardiac arrest 3 hours later. Autopsy revealed third-degree burns to the inner walls of his throat. His lungs were filled with fine copper dust. There was no source for either. SCP-077 is inert. It has never moved, never spoken, never shifted, but its presence is undeniable. It is not a relic. It is a mind, and it wants something back that we have spent centuries trying to forget. SCP-077 is housed at Site-12's Deep Archive Containment Sector, Sublevel Theta 7-. A reinforced vault located 120 meters underground, surrounded by lead and copper-lined walls. Temperature 2 degrees Celsius. Humidity 15%. The vault has no access panels, no ventilation shafts, and no internet connectivity. All materials entering or exiting the chamber must be passed through a sterilization hatch and examined for trace contamination, not biological but conceptual. Because 077 doesn't spread through air or fluid or skin contact, it spreads through language. And so, its most dangerous property is not its presence, but its description. Verbal documentation of SCP-077 beyond controlled containment logs is forbidden under Protocol Silent Scepter. All staff interacting with SCP-077 must undergo daily mnemonic compression therapy. They are trained not just in containment procedures, but in forgetting. They do not read its file. They memorize approved euphemisms. The burnt thing, the coil memory, that which remembers skyfire. The vault chamber is layered with suppression glyphs, ancient and modern, designed not to block 077's effects, but to confuse them, to scatter its signals, to keep its thoughts from forming coherent patterns. And most critically, an electromagnetic pulse field pulses every 13.7 seconds. Its purpose? To erase the buildup of coherent cognition in the surrounding air. Because according to Foundation linguists, 077 doesn't think like a human being. It gathers thought. It waits for enough of itself to be recalled. Then it begins to return, not physically, but conceptually. Containment, then, is not about locking the skull away. It's about maintaining a vacuum where memory cannot survive. And yet, there are cracks. Researchers have begun reporting dreams of a great city made of bone and bronze, burning under a sun that bleeds copper. They wake up humming. They reach for pens they don't remember holding. Some whisper strange syllables as they sleep. And even now, the Foundation cannot determine, are they remembering SCP-077? Or is SCP-077 remembering itself? Through them, SCP-077's physical silence is a paradox. It radiates presence and yet emits nothing. And yet, over the decades, Foundation historians, cognitive linguists, and conceptual theologians have converged on one hypothesis. SCP-077 may be all that remains of a pre-verbal deity, not a god of fire or war or sky, but of language itself, a divine intellect that existed not in form, but in meaning, that ruled not through miracles, but through grammar. And when it fell, when its empire of syntax cracked and bled into the earth, all that was left behind was a thought, trapped inside bone, the skull, the rot memory. Cross-referencing SCP-077's influence patterns with known ancient structures has revealed troubling correlations. The geometric phrasing in the spiral glyphs mirrors the pattern found in the Lost Bass Ukon Codex, an extinct language rumored to rewrite the minds of readers as they read. Certain druidic texts describe a king with a head of ash who forgot his name and so forgot death. And the silent shrines of northern Anatolia, built with copper fused to bone, feature similar carvings to those etched into SCP-077's crown, and in each account, a warning, not about destruction, but about remembrance, because perhaps the greatest power is not fire or strength, but the ability to be remembered in the minds of others. And perhaps SCP-077 was once worshipped, not because it commanded lightning, but because it spoke and language bent to it. But it lost that voice. It was burned, sealed, its syllables torn out and scattered across centuries. And now, in containment, that voice is rebuilding, not quickly, not loudly, but coherently, piece by piece, in the dreams of staff, in the unconscious scribbles, in the harmonics of people who hum songs they don't recognize. The Foundation calls it residual conceptual integrity. Others call it resurgence. But one archivist, Dr. Olena Reeds, described it best in a confidential memo. It's not trying to escape. It's trying to finish a sentence that began before history. There are incidents in Foundation records that do not remain in the archives. They remain in people, in tremors, in nightmares, in entire departments that no longer speak above a whisper. The Site-12 lung collapse incident was one of these. Officially, it was logged as a structural failure, an electromagnetic pulse destabilization event, localized resonant field anomaly. But to those who were there, it began with a sound, not from SCP-077, but from a technician named Elias Marrow. Elias had been part of the containment monitoring team for 11 months. Level 2 clearance, quiet, precise. He followed protocol Silent Scepter perfectly, but something changed. The night prior, his colleagues noticed him murmuring in his sleep. Not in English, not in any human language, but in shapes. They said the sounds didn't come from his mouth, they came from his breath. The next morning, during routine chamber diagnostics, he paused at the viewing slit, lowered his clipboard, and whispered a single syllable, Kair. It doesn't translate. It has no written form, no documented root. But when he said it, every light in sublevel Theta-7 went out. The copper lining around SCP-077's containment chamber cracked, and for 0.6 seconds, the skull's mouth, which had not moved in decades, shifted. Not open, not closed, just aligned. Every staff member on that floor collapsed. Some gasped, some screamed, others convulsed violently, hands clawing at their ears. Even though there was no sound, 17 personnel were hospitalized. 3 fell into comas, and 1, Dr. Vance, recovered, but was left unable to process visual language. He can no longer read. When shown a stop sign, he sees a wound. The word Kair has been banned from all Foundation phonetic systems. Attempts to replicate it digitally result in automatic system corruption. Speech synthesis programs crash. Microphones warp the waveform. It is not a word. It is a trigger, a remnant, a syllable torn from a language that never should have been known again. And now it exists. Once more, whispered, heard, and never forgotten. SCP-077 is not evil. It does not hunt. It does not move. It remembers. And that is enough, because memory, when buried too deep, rots, becomes something else, something that doesn't just haunt you, but waits for you to speak. That is what the Foundation learned far too late. It isn't the skull that's dangerous. It's the space between what we've forgotten and what we try to name again, the space where history bends into myth, where thought becomes structure, where language becomes an altar to something we swore never to kneel before again. We did not contain SCP-077. We entombed it, not to hold it back, but to keep ourselves from looking inward. Because when you stand before it, when the hum in your chest syncs with the pulse of ancient fire and the glyphs behind your eyes start glowing with meaning, you realize something no file can say. SCP-077 is not trying to remember what it was. It is trying to remember what you were. And the moment you say the wrong word, the moment you pronounce its shape with enough clarity, it remembers. Through you. So the next time you hear a word you don't recognize, a dream whisper, or a foreign rhythm, don't say it back. Don't write it down. Don't try to understand. Because once a forgotten god begins to remember, what follows is not resurrection, it's recognition. Thank you for entering another anomaly in the Containment Zone. And if your tongue ever starts moving before your thoughts do, if you ever begin to say a word you don't remember learning, stop. Let it forget, because if it doesn't, you will remember too much, and in that remembering, you won't survive.